Hello everybody and welcome back to Chapter Tactics, where we go over tactics and strategies to help both new and veteran players alike. You will notice that we are not using webcams today. Decided not to use them. It's a more comfortable episode, so just sit back, close your eyes. Unless you're driving, don't drive and close your eyes. Just sit back and relax, and we're going to fill your ear holes with knowledge here. I am your host, Magikarp Usefly, also known as Matt, and with me today, we've got Batty from the Harlequin Discord. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and all the things that you do?
How's it going, everybody? As Matt graciously introduced me, my name is Batty. My real name is Jared, if you ever see me pop up in goings-ons, but I go by Batty mostly on the Harlequin Discord, the Harlequin subreddit, so on and so forth. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. This is going to be a really fun time.
When I first started, in 8th edition, I started going into, the first real Discord that I went into for 40k was, Tyranids, and that was it. And then now that, new books are dropping and stuff, and I have more armies, now I'm starting to join, these other Discords. And, yeah, like you said, you're in control, or, you're the owner for the Harlequin Discord. How's that been working out, especially with, the new book?
It's honestly been really cool. So I kind of spearheaded the whole Harlequin community. I shouldn't say that's a little braggadocious of me, but I kind of got pushed into the role of spearheading the whole Harlequin online community. I'm the de facto head moderator of the subreddit. I created the Discord, so on and so forth, and it's been such an awesome time. I'm so happy with our community, the people we have, the discourse and the conversations we have. I genuinely couldn't ask for a better group of people to call our tribe.
Yeah. But did you see an uptick in the community when the new book came out?
We did actually. So going over the analytics real quick over just my memory, we saw an uptick of about 300 to 400 members in the 9-week precedent period of the codex hype. Wow. Especially when the leaks started ticking in to right about now. We crested about 400 new users in that 9-ish week period.
Okay. And how long have you been playing Harlequins for? Did you start off with Eldar and stuff and then go into Harlequins? What was your story going into it?
I actually started in 8th edition just like you did. I'm not sure if we started at the same time, but I started at the advent of 8th edition. I'm still a competitive Magic the Gathering player, but I was at my LGS playing some Magic, and I noticed some guys over there playing what was 40k, and I was like, oh, this is cool, what is this? And this is Warhammer, the new edition's coming out, come and hang out and talk to us. And I went home, saw some battle reports online, I saw some mini wargaming stuff, and I saw Harlequins, and I was hooked immediately. I'm like, that one, I want to do that thing. So I got into it. I started initially playing Drakari because Harlequins was kind of it's a hard army to dive headfirst into as a first army, but I immediately pivoted into Harlequins once I was capable, and I've just been driving it ever since. So Harlequins really was my de facto first army. I just started with Dark Eldar models to actually get on the table.
Yeah, it's always been a strong argument about Harlequins. A lot of people really like Harlequins, but for a first army, it's an army that naturally breaks a lot of rules. So,
exactly.
So it's hard to pick up as a first army and then pivot to another army after Harlequins being what? I don't get advance in charge? What is this? What is this blasphemy? I don't understand.
And especially in the beginning of 8th edition, where you were allowed to be so generous with your souping options, I could play whatever I wanted in a single detachment. So I could play my Scourges and my Cabalite Warriors and my Players and my Haywire bikes and not care.
Yeah. So you've been playing for a decent amount of time. So you played through 8th edition, going into 9th edition, and that transition from 8th to 9th with an 8th edition codex, Harlequins did, pretty well, right? In the beginning of 9th edition, they did somewhat fine.
Yeah, we had a pretty soft transition into 9th edition because the edition itself was fairly generous in a lot of the rules changes towards the Harlequin playstyle, that it was a really smooth transition for us into the edition. And so, yeah, I think we had a very easy time getting into 9th edition as a whole.
Yeah, there were a lot of cool stratagems and tactics that carried over to 8th edition. Things like, Flip Belt, obviously, but stuff like Segaro's Jest. We had that White Dwarf Psychic Awakening, basically, or supplement. Yeah. And that one really brought up the faction more, gave us access to pivotal roles, all that cool stuff that, people know about Harlequins now. So this would be a good segue of what do you think about 8th edition Harlequins versus the 9th edition ones now with the new book? Oh, wait, I forgot to say this. This show is brought to you by FrontlineGaming.org, where you can get amazing game mats for not just your 40k games, but almost any tabletop game out there. Purchase miniatures at a discount and join some of the largest 40k events in the industry. We've also got shows like Signals from the Frontline, Chapter Tactics, which you're listening to right now, Grim After Dark, and so much more. That's FrontlineGaming.org. Also, on top of that, we've got BAO coming up. We've got LSO coming up, ACO. We got so much cool stuff coming up. So go get your tickets to those events. You can check it out in the link in the description, all that good stuff. And let's get on with the rest of this episode.
So that's a really there's two ways you can answer that question. I genuinely don't like heavily miss anything from 8th edition. I know it's a bit of a hot take. I don't overtly miss anything from our 8th edition codex. I think 9th edition gave us a lot of good toys, a lot of new rules, and retained a lot of the staying power that we had in 8th edition. There are a few things that we had to compromise on. So I guess my answer would be these things. You know, I miss the overarching choreographer of war reroll aura. Going back down to the only ones is kind of crummy. I'm a little undecided in how I like the Haywire change compared to 8th edition. I kind of see arguments for both sides of that story.
Yeah. And Haywire cannons are like in a weird spot. They're like strength 3, AP 3, D3, and they're a heavy weapon. So it's like, it's weird, man, compared to what it was before. And like the mortal wounds aren't like, you can still get a lot of mortal wounds, but it's not as, I don't know. The damage, I think, from like the, what is it? The stats from earlier when the book first released, like the damage is pretty much the same, if not better. But that's into vehicles. Like
exactly.
Yeah.
So I get what GW was doing with this rebalance, and I don't overtly disagree with it because, you know, the Haywire is meant to take down keyword vehicle weapons. I get that. I agree with that. You're not wrong. In 8th edition, it was objectively better than shuriken in virtually every scenario. There was virtually no reason to run shuriken over Haywire because Haywire still mulched infantry. It still burned down vehicles. The only thing it didn't do was monsters, and it doesn't do that anyway. It's not for that. So what does it matter? You know, now we actually have that pick and choose of, do we want the strength 6-2 damage shuriken, or do we want the Haywire that will still statistically melt vehicles?
Yeah, and like that's kind of like the problem, right? Because vehicles are already like out of the meta as of right now. I think like the only vehicles you really see are dreadnoughts and devilfish. And I think like those are like the only vehicles that you see nowadays. God forbid you face against a national military player. But you know, you don't have those, so then like that kind of makes Haywire just kind of poo-poo garbage, right? Like it just doesn't fit well. Like a T6 thing, like if you're shooting into something that's T6, like say, what is it, Virtus Praetors, right? You're wounding on 6s. That's awful. That's so bad. That's so bad. Yeah.
It's really not even fun to shoot into just regular T4 infantry, like MEQs. It's not even fun for that. Like it's great for mulching guard, but what isn't?
Yeah, right? It's like, when all of your weapons can kill Marines, who cares if you can kill Marines, right? Like it's the same concept where like it's like a kill more secondary where it's just I kill it more. I was gonna kill it already, but now I just kill it more, and it's just
no, exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right. Another change that's really big is the fusion pistol changes, right?
Yeah.
Going from 5 down to 2.
So I even back in the days, like I was always a big proponent of the soaring spite playstyle, just the zooming fusion boats, you know, maximizing fusion output. That was always my niche. That was the thing I liked to do. So it was really back and forth for me to change off of 2 or 5 fusions back down to 2, but now I'm not even sure if I want to at all, and that's weird.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. It's the 6-inch. The 6-inch range is still pretty hard to deal with. You know, you run light, you can advance and shoot, which is nice, but then you're kind of like mispositioning yourself sometimes with fusion pistols, and then you only get like 2 shots with them, and then it's like, well, let's hope that they land. Like let's you hit on 3s, you can't get like reroll wound rolls while you're inside of a transport as well.
Exactly.
So it doesn't make much sense with like 2 fusion pistols as much as it used to be. Also losing stuff like Segaro's Jest, where I think it was Segaro's, or no, Curtain Falls, where you could
yes, Curtain Fall,
yeah, now you have to be next to a transport in order for it to go off. It makes troops like super unreliable.
Yeah, and especially getting troops out there is really, really sketchy right now. And like you alluded to, getting your boat that close to be within 6 inches, getting it that danger close, even though our boats are still pretty tricksy, we still have a hard time getting shot down with mirage
Yeah.
launchers and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's still not worth it. Not for those 2 shots. There aren't many situations where I'm looking. I mean, obviously, aside from the elephant in the room that is Voidweavers,
Yeah.
I don't really see myself getting in a situation where like, I need to be in that 6 inches away to pop my fusions instead of just shooting shuriken.
Yeah, yeah. And then if you're up against the mirror matchup and they bring Mirror Architect with their Shadow Seer, then you can't even shoot your fusion.
Yeah,
pistols,
fusions
so
physically don't work.
Huh. Cool. Well, this sucks.
But I wasted those 10 points per troop.
Yeah. You just alluded to the 9 Voidweavers, right?
Yeah.
So obviously 9 Voidweaver spam. It's going through the meta like chili at a fast food restaurant. How does that make you feel?
It's really bittersweet, dude. Like, so I love the Voidweaver as a premise. I like having that fast, that mobile gunboat, that gunship mentality. I really like that for Harlequins, and I think it's a great spot to be in both fluff and rules-wise. But it's really bittersweet seeing a unit that I enjoyed and I tried so hard to make work for literally years be so dominant and take a lot of the fun out of the game on both sides of the table.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that. The whole 9 Voidweaver thing, like before, you could only run them as 3, and the weapon option wasn't very good. It was like, like what you said, you took so long trying to make that one unit work. I
actually had a single Voidweaver in my list at LVO 2019 ? And I mean, it worked. It did the thing, but like, I didn't need it. It shouldn't have been there. But like, I tried so hard to make those things palatable, and now they're just. They went from 0 to 60 in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like now that there's 9 Voidweaver spams coming out, and that's like the staple now for Harlequins. Like when you're looking at like your list, do you start with 9 Voidweavers? Or are you like part of the whole group where you don't want to run that many Voidweavers, or at least before the bounce like that's about to come out, which is probably going to nerf it like pretty hard?
Oh, yeah. I think it's unrealistic to expect Voidweavers to be untouched at all. We're going to be seeing some kind of kneecapping to Voidweavers soon. But personally speaking, I don't run 9 Voidweavers. I've only ever played with a maximum of 6, and I haven't really felt very restricted by it. It's also, the models I own. I only own 9 boats as of this recording, so I can't play 9 Voidweavers and have transports.
Yeah,
but I don't really want to run 9 Voidweavers, and I don't mean to be kind of just stamping my feet and being, well, no, I don't want to do it. But like, I there's other things I want to do with the army. I want to have more transports. I want to have 2 Death Jesters. I want to have at least 1 Shadow Seer. There's other stuff I want to fill. I'm going to keep my my Solitaire in my list. So there's other places I can put those points.
Yeah, no, the book is like surprisingly very in depth for only having like 11 pages. Everything feels good. Like there's some units that I feel like are still a little bit overcosted. I think that Skyweavers are still a tad bit overcosted. Comparatively to like Voidweavers and stuff. But like there's so many different playstyles you can do, and I think that that's something that not a lot of people really know about Harlequins. They probably just look at it as like, oh, it's an army with only 8 data sheets. What's the most that they can do? There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like
we're very gifted the fact that our Satyrs are very different in how they perform and how they act, and we have very specialized niche units that fill roles very differently within those Satyrs. A light troop is going to function fundamentally different than a twilight troop. A light squad of Skyweavers is going to function fundamentally different than a dark squad of Skyweavers.
Yeah, and I think that that's like incredibly good, and I feel like that having that inside of our pocket makes Harlequins a very diverse army in like different types of metas, depending on like what's strong and what isn't strong. You can kind of like, flip-flop between different sadists, and I think that that's awesome. Like you look at other armies where, they'll have 9 different sub-factions and only 2 of them are good. Like look at Grey Knights, right? There's only like 2 that are good, but we have 3 that are just all good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have 100% uptick on our sub faction versus some factions getting like a 15 to a 30% uptick. Like, that's incredible.
So, you were talking about like you only run like 6 Voidweavers at max. What are the other builds from Harlequins that you've been enjoying or see promise with?
So I think both Dark and Twilight have some play into the game, and you and I talked about this a little bit in the Discord itself, that Light provides the path of least resistance and has the highest potential in what it does. However, I still think Dark has the highest maximum potential and output as far as raw performance. So I really do want to start seeing Dark pop up on the table because that extra AP can do a whole lot of work, and Dark's sub-faction traits and its warlord trait are going to put in a lot of work for this army, even just at the slightest meta pivot, should we see that in the future, especially once Voidweavers become less palatable and they stop eating up an automatic 800 points of your list.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know what the traits that you gain for a Dark Sadith, it is fight on death if you haven't fought already, just built in, which is incredibly good.
Incredible.
Yep. And then you get extra AP with all of your weapons, so that means that things like your Harlequin blades are going to become AP4 in melee combat. Things like your Zephyr glaives are going to be AP3. And then you can spend 2 CP to ignore invulns. So it's like a very aggressive, very high octane, I guess, type of play style for Harlequins, right?
It's going to be a very forgiving playstyle because you can you can kind of YOLO charge your troops and get them in there because they're going to fight regardless. Fight last doesn't matter to Dark. You having the initiative doesn't matter because they're gonna fight either way. And with that extra AP comboed with some of the other, little tricksy hobbitses that we can do, you're going down. They're taking you with them.
Yeah, and it's actually a really cool playstyle. I think that recently Steven Box from Vanguard Tactics got, I believe, second place at a recent GT. He couldn't compete for first place because he had to leave.
Okay.
Yeah, but he got up to second place running a dark list with 0 Voidweavers.
Yeah. Good for. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Box is an incredible player, so that doesn't surprise me at least.
Yeah, and he's been playing Harlequins for like a long time too. So he knows what's going on. I recently played like trying to find like fun lists to play. I recently played a Harlequins game running the Yin Karn and just forgoing Luck of the Laughing God, but keeping the Dark Sadith trait. So then that way I could basically sacrifice my troops. I don't lose value because they still fight on death. And then I just pop up the Yin Karn right next to it in order to set up for next turn. And then you're still like very strong in shooting and in melee, so you can still like kill off units, bring up the Yin Karn. You don't need Luck of the Laughing God because you want to die anyway, so it doesn't matter. There's just like fun stuff you can do with the Eldar book, and it's not even just like Harlequins. Like you can still soup with like stuff like Drukhari. You can soup with Eldar. Has that come up with you at all? Like starting to soup Harlequins as traveling players?
Personally, not yet. I do say yet because I do plan to experiment with it, but I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to my Harlequins. I really like to play mono faction and kind of maximize my faction as it is, but I will play soup lists in a less competitive sense. Of course, I want to play, I want to win, I want to optimize the list I'm making, but I won't do it in a sense of trying to min-max my list, but it's definitely on my docket to have happen in the future.
Yeah. I'm pretty much the same way when it comes to Harlequins. I like just them running as a pure faction because I think that's the coolest. So how did it feel going from like your own codex over to an Eldar codex and like being consolidated into a single codex?
It virtually doesn't bother me at all. It kind of stinks that like all the artwork isn't there, and I have the special edition Eldar Codex right here in my lap, and I have my 8th edition special edition Harlequin Codex on my desk, and it's kind of sad to see a swooping hawk on here instead of a player, but it is what it is. Yeah. Honestly, just less money I had to spend. I was gonna buy the craftable book either way. Yeah. I might have gotten the Inari book too if it had its own, so I'd rather spend $80 on this than God knows what I would have spent on all 3 books. So it doesn't bother me all that much.
Can you imagine a Yanari book being sold for $60 and only having 5 pages? Wow.
I mean, they don't have a whole lot less information than we do, and we were our own codex last year, so...
Yeah, they have, like, almost, I think if I'm remembering correctly, Black Templars have more data sheets in their codex than Yanari does by, like, 3 or 4. Which is a very... that kind of sucks. Like...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of stupid. So, do you want to? How about you go over like the different builds that you've been going for with Harlequins that doesn't involve Voidweavers or like doesn't go for that 9 Voidweaver spam?
Yeah, for sure. So I like as I mentioned before, I haven't been really pushing for 9 Voidweavers at all, and I've been trying to brainstorm different ideas for lists that take
Hmm.
fewer void weavers. Like I'm still running 6 here and there, but I'm looking at lists that only run like 2 as like outflankers to kind of just run out and pop those prismatics where they need to, or only a squad of 3 or none. Where I'm trying to fit Skyweavers back into my list a lot more now,
Yeah.
because as you mentioned before, Skyweavers are a little overcosted. I think void weaver, balance aside, I think
Hmm.
Skyweavers could still stand to have a couple points shaved off of them, because spending, what is it, like 54 points with upgrades for
Yeah.
a 3 wound model is pretty feels bad in a lot of scenarios. But I still really love the utility of these jet bikes, and especially if we ever see a need for an uptick of an abundance of Haywire, like if AdMech comes around and with in full force, they're gonna have a lot of playability and a lot of options for us that I want to be ready for, and I want to understand how to play around.
Yeah, definitely. I've been playing around with some Skyweavers too. When I first started with Harlequins, I was on that. I played a lot of Frozen Stars, so I have like 15
Yeah.
Skyweavers,
Yep.
right? So like their versatility is still the same as it is now, but they did lose some things that made them stronger before, like Prismatic Blur. You can't have
Yes.
Prismatic Blur on them anymore, which is a
Yes.
huge blow to Skyweavers if you
Mhm.
really think about it. Like,
Oh, it very much is. There's a couple of things that balance off of that, and why that's such a big hit to us. First and foremost, just having a unit that is native -1 to shooting, which it's not anymore,
yeah.
that can get a 3-up invuln with anywhere from a minimum of 6, but no one ever takes 2 Skyweavers. Say balancing somewhere between 15 and 18 wounds. That is -1 to hit, 3-up invuln. That's an incredibly tanky, especially a line that
Hmm.
you can spread out and just make this, a line of demarcation in the middle of the battlefield that says you need to get through me and you can't. And not
Yeah.
to mention, we can talk about some of the ways that 8th edition used to abuse that, where you could Twilight Pathways it and then use
Oh,
it in the psychic phase, so that way you had 2 units with a 3-up invuln. It
yep.
was it was a really hard nut to crack.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And then like and if you guys didn't know, before you used to be able to use Twilight Pathways during your psychic phase, have a unit advance, and that was the only prerequisite that you needed for Prismatic Blur. Uh
Precisely.
so if you could advance inside your psychic phase, then you can cast Prismatic Blur on 2 units at the same time instead of just one, right? But then there was an FAQ that changed that because it was a little bit too strong, because that is pretty freaking strong.
Yeah.
But because they don't have that Prismatic Blur anymore, it's hard to use these Skyweavers in the same way that you used to. Before, you could use them as like tar pitting units.
Yes.
You can still tar pit them, but you're only going off of like a T4 chassis with 3 wounds, and
Mhm.
the only caveat is like it's -1 to hit, and you can't reroll your hit rolls against it.
Yeah.
It does not survive like very
No.
long at all.
And the Skyweaver Mirage is only -1 in melee now. It's not even -1 in shooting
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah. You'd have to pop lightning fast reactions in order to
Yep.
give it a -1 to hit in the first place. Yeah. So, you couple that with Haywire cannons not being that great anymore.
Mhm.
Their melee is better though.
The melee is significantly better.
Yeah, strength 5, AP 2, 2 damage. You get 4 attacks on it per swing. Like that's
Yeah.
pretty good. But was it 3 attacks before? I think it was 3,
Uh,
right?
If I want me to pull it up real quick, I have my book in front of me so I can
Yeah.
check for you. But
Yeah.
I want to say yes, because for some reason that player who wrote on the back didn't know how to swing his thing. Yes, it was 3 attacks. So yeah, he didn't
Yeah.
know how to swing his glaive properly, but he went to the gym and he figured it out.
Yeah. Like Skyweavers before, they especially in Frozen Stars, because then that's how you would get like 20 attacks on the charge.
Oh yeah.
They were very, very pivotal for the Harlequin army, and
No
now
pun
that's
intended.
yeah. But now in 9th edition, they've taken a step back because of Voidweavers being significantly stronger for the same point cost. You're looking at a 90-point Voidweaver for 90 points of 2 bikes. Like that, it's a no-brainer. Why would you go for 2 bikes when you can just go
Exactly.
for a Voidweaver instead?
That is objectively better and does virtually everything except melee combat significantly better than the Skyweaver currently does.
Exactly. So, with the Voidweaver more than likely about to get hit, does that mean that you're gonna start like putting even more Skyweavers into your builds now, or what are you thinking about doing with Skyweavers? Are you thinking about bringing them back in, or are you leaving them out? What's your take on it?
A lot of that's going to hinge on exactly what happens with our data slate change when it comes about. Because if Voidweavers get nuked into the ground, then there's a lot of room. That Skyweavers have some pretty big shoes to fill, but they've got the ability to do it. I'm not sure. Speaking off the cuff, I'm not sure my list changes. At least my competitive list, my actually trying to win list. I'm not sure it changes all that much at all currently. But every kick in the shin that the Void Weavers take is a further incentive for me to start playtesting and start actually grinding with Skyweavers and getting used to using them again, because they are very close on the coattails of Void Weavers for filling that same slot.
Oh yeah, definitely. What, they lose like 3 shots of shuriken cannons, because and then that's mostly it. You're trading out your prismatic cannons for a Zephyr Glaive instead, which is not as good, obviously, but still good enough, right?
It's significantly more relevant in a different role, though, because your bikes like to get close and they like to be in the fray, which your Void Weavers don't, and having that glaive to back you up in that melee combat is really useful.
Yeah, and one thing that that Skyweavers have over Void Weavers as of right now is that they are core, which means that they do get access to the -1 to wound off of the Shadow Seer, which isn't like that crazy, because most of the time your Skyweavers are off doing like their own thing and they're not next to the Shadow Seer most of the time. And then they also can gain access to having Fog of Dreams casted on them. So that gives them a little bit more resiliency, right? Do you want to explain what 100%. Fog of Dreams does?
So Fog of Dreams targets a friendly Harlequin unit, friendly Harlequin core unit, and is it core and character, correct? I think you can use it on character. I believe it's core and
character. Yeah.
So targets a friendly Harlequin core unit and says if this unit is not the closest visible model and outside of, I want to say 12 inches, it can't be shot.
12.
You can't shoot it. It just doesn't exist in terms of shooting attacks, which is super helpful in getting these units that want to be danger close, like Skyweavers, like players, RIP core, in the fray, and giving them that extra room to make that advance uninhibited. Another
unit that's also incredibly good right now, that we haven't even talked about yet, is the Starweaver, the transport that we have access to. Gone up in terms of even more resilience. It's the same type of thing as a Void Weaver, -1 to hit naturally in both melee and in range combat. Plus, you can't reroll your hit roll, 6 wounds, T5, all that good stuff. You slap on Look of the Laughing God, makes your troops a lot more resilient. What are you thinking about these Star Weavers? I absolutely love them, and like I try to like put as much as I can. Oh, dude.
So I don't want to say they received a glow up, because they were good to begin with. Like they were no slouch to begin with, but they really did kind of keep up with the rest of the army as we got that rebalancing. And as you mentioned, both the Mirage Launcher that gives it the blankest -1 to hit, outside of light because whatever, but the blankest -1 to hit, no rerolls is huge for these things. Not having to reroll against them increases their resilience exponentially. They still have their base 4+ invulns, so they're a little tricksy to take down, but the shuriken change did wonders for them in their ability to actually soften up targets, whether it's for your Void Weavers to cap them off and finish them off, or just to get your players in and bounce them out and do those last couple mortal wounds, removing key infantry members, chipping away armor pieces, so on and so forth, to allow your infantry to take those last final shots and get through into that meaty center.
Yeah. And I think that what you're explaining here is everyone's seeing like a lot of this 9 Void Weaver spam thing where they can, just absolutely nuke a unit without taking damage back, right? But if you look at the rest of the Harlequin Codex, a lot of the damage that you're going to be seeing is basically just like layering the different ways that you can deal damage, right? You have to deal damage
100%.
inside of, you have to deal damage inside your shooting phase. You have to do it in your melee phase. You have to do it possibly in your psychic phase, even in the charge phase. You have to really work hard sometimes with Harlequins in order to get the damage out without the Void Weavers being like something that you can fall back on, right?
Exactly.
Which I feel like is so cool. Like it's so fun being able to have like an army where, yes, 9 Void Weavers is strong, but like if you strip away the 9 Void Weavers, obviously the army does get weaker. However, there are some options that you can do in order to layer on damage in order to still swing back at people, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I genuinely believe that the Voidweaver is a problem. We need to do something about addressing the power level of the Voidweaver in and of itself. But our codex is going to live without the Voidweaver. The Voidweaver could hypothetically be plucked out of our codex, and we still have play into the game. Now, don't get me wrong; we will suffer dramatically
Mm-hmm.
against T7 and up. Without a prismatic cannon currently
Mm-hmm.
in the current
Mm-hmm.
sandbox, but our army still lives without the Voidweaver. We still have incredible melee. We still have very potent shooting. We still have fantastic mobility and scoring potential. This game is
Yeah.
about scoring, and we score very well in the current game.
Yeah, and that's what's really cool about Harlequins is their flexibility in secondaries. When you look at like the 9 Voidweaver spam lists, right? One of the things that people are totally gawking about is obviously the 9 Voidweavers. I keep saying that. We're going to talk about that later with like, talking about what we want out of the balance slate. But when you're looking at like these 9 Voidweaver lists, dude, the flexibility in the secondaries that you can take is insane. It's so crazy. You can switch between deadly performance and to the last,
Mm-hmm.
or you can take no prisoners if you're going up against Tau and you feel like that you are just going to absolutely murk their battle suits. You can take
Yeah.
Stranglehold, you can take Engage, you can take Warp Veil, you can take Psychic Interrogation. There's so many options in secondaries for Harlequins. It's like, it's crazy. And all of their secondaries inside the book, like besides maybe what's the one show your performance or something like that, the one where it's like a
Yeah,
spotlight.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like to the stage or something like that.
yeah, something like that. Besides that one, like the Warp Veil and Deadly Performance are both incredibly good
Yeah.
secondaries in this book. It's
So I'm the
nuts.
kind of person that always took engage because it's just like it's a brain dead choice for Harlequins because we move so fast. We have such generous choices for our secondaries right now. I forgot to take engage. Like I'm just like I want to try this. I want to try that. Ooh, that one looks fun. That looks doable. Oh wait, I forgot engage was a thing. I could have just
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And what what's also cool about Engage is that like you take Engage and you have like these Star Weavers that can move like 22 inches because they have a 6-inch auto advance, all that stuff, right? And like what
Yeah.
you can do is you can just like take your Star Weavers and your Sky Weavers and pull them away from objectives. So then it kind of like
Mm-hmm.
makes opponents have to get off of those objectives in order to deal with
Yeah.
them. So like there's so many mind games and different ways that you can play the game with Harlequins that have like a high ceiling. And it's just like it's the same thing as 8th edition, right? 8th
No,
edition.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never thought I'd be talking about kiting in this context because you don't think about kiting in a game like this, but that's exactly what we can do because these things need to be dealt with.
You have all these options to different secondaries, you have all these options to different units, all that stuff. That's all good and dandy. However, we do know that a balanced slate is coming out, according to the Warhammer community page.
Yes.
I think like by next weekend, I believe I think it's on
Mhm.
next Friday. So with that in mind, let's get into like just the huge nitty gritty here. We'll start with you. What are you expecting is going to change, and what would you like to be changed about Harlequins in this balance slate? And just to throw in anything like what else from other armies you'd want to see.
Yeah, so specifically relating to Harlequins, we can address the elephant in the room that obviously Voidweavers need to have a bit of an adjustment. I think, specifically speaking, I think if we can tack on about 10 to 15 points to the chassis of the Voidweaver and then make the prismatic cost between 5 and 10 points in and of itself, if we can put the Voidweaver somewhere in the ballpark of about 120 ish points, you should be able to take a squad of 9, hypothetically, assuming we can keep 9. You
Mm-hmm.
should have to invest at least about 1,000 points into taking 9 Voidweavers. 9
Yeah.
Voidweavers should be an investment if we're still able to take them. I shouldn't just be able to brain dead slap 9 Voidweavers to my list and only spend 800 points.
Yeah.
Voidweavers absolutely need to be receiving at least 25 points onto their data sheet as it is right now. On top of that, I think Skyweavers are getting a bit of a love tap too. I'm sorry, Starweavers, not Skyweavers. Oh god,
Yeah.
Starweavers probably getting about 10 to 15 points of their own, just because they are extremely effective, as we mentioned, at what they do, and we need to kind of pull those back just a little bit and tuck them on to pull them by the collar a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, Lastly, and the hot take that we've talked about a little bit, Luck of the Laughing God needs some work. It
Yeah.
needs some attention because it's
Sadly.
probably. I
Yeah.
agree. So I love Luck of the Laughing God. as an ability, as a thematic, piece of the game. I think it is a fantastic. Whoever designed it deserves kudos.
Oh yeah,
But
it's so
it's a
good.
little. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And I don't think it in of itself is busted. The mechanic isn't broken. However, the abundance to which we can use it, we can abuse it, is. And that's what needs to be adjusted. There's a couple ways you can look at it. Some people option the idea of taking 1 to 2 dice away from us. Yeah, sure, fair. Some people are floating the idea that you can only spend certain numbers of dice in certain situations. Like you can only use it on 1 unit per turn. You can only use 1 per phase per turn. So, a couple different balanced ideas like that. And I think some of those are pretty valid. I don't think you should be able to dump all 5 of your luck dice into a single squad of Voidweavers or into your solitaire or into, God knows what else, because that really swings the game. And that might be the most unfun circumstance to be in this game.
Yeah. I've played games with Luck of the Laughing God and Harlequins and everything like that. And it can be like if you're looking into your opponent's eyes as you say, okay, look at the Laughing God, you just see them die inside. Like it is so sad to look at, and it's like, sorry, dude, you're D3 plus 3 damage. Oh, I failed it. JK.
Yep.
it's so sad.
Part of what makes it a little bitter to be around is that the game literally invented this core mechanic to keep these rerolls from touching those abusable units, to keep things like, in our circumstances, Voidweavers. But you look at stuff like, Caladius tanks back when they were relevant for Custodes. You look at Primaris vehicles sitting in Primaris castles, that they took that away from them because those situations weren't fun, and then they just threw us this ability that said, yeah, all of your stuff gets rerolls. And it kind of defeats the relevance of the core mechanic in and of itself. But I also agree with the fact that we literally have no other source of rerolls in our army.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to bring up right after right after you're done, is that Look at the Laughing God is powerful, right? I think that we can all agree that. But the problem is that out of all of Harlequin, all the things that Harlequins have access to, I think that there's only 2, maybe 3 defensive buffs that you can give. And that is it. You have lightning fast reactions. You have prismatic blur that can only be used on infantry now, and you have your Shadow Seers -1 to wound for core.
Exactly.
And that is it. Once you, a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, your boats are hard to hit, and then you have Look at the Laughing God. It's the same thing that Custodians are going through, where it's like, if we don't have access to those options, then we kind of just die, and there's nothing we can do about it, right?
Precisely. Because we are still paper thin, 1 wound T3 infantry models. Our highest toughness in the army is toughness 5. Most things are chewing through us without our invulns, without our tricksy hobbits' abilities of, hard to hit and all that good stuff. We just fall apart without them.
Oh yeah. What you take your troops outside of your Starweaver, put them in the middle of the board, see how long they last. They will die in 2 seconds. Yeah, it's ridiculous, man. There is nothing you can do about it. Your units will just die without Luck of the Laughing God. I do kind of like the idea of restricting the amount to units, right? I think that bringing it down to 1 is a little bit too much of a knee-jerk reaction. I think that's a little bit uncalled for. Yeah, I guess.
Agreed.
I would be comfortable with going down to 2 or 3. I think that would be fine. Per unit, you can only use Look at the Laughing God 2 or 3 times for that unit, and I think that kind of balances out more. Yeah. Because the mechanic is cool. When you're playing Twilight and you take the Twilight Warlord trait, where if you just roll 4 Luck of the Laughing God
you just
dice
get a
and you get CP. Yeah, it's fun. It's
super fun. It's so thematic.
Yeah, it's so thematic. I talked about this before on here, but man, GW has been doing such a good job with internal balance for these latest codexes. Even though externally they're really strong, you're looking at Tau, looking at Harlequins, all that stuff, right? But internally, man, dude, Tau feels amazing to play. Harlequins feels amazing to play. Genestealer Cults, Thousand Suns. There's so much cool stuff that's out there with these newer codexes, and I just want to take a second to really admire like how good they are, because they're just,
I could not agree more.
yeah, like I absolutely love them. I think that the external balance does need work though. So those are the Harlequin changes that you want. Are there any other Harlequin changes that you think are necessary?
So some people seem to think that players need to have a little bit of a bump, and I'm not sure I agree with that.
I don't agree with that.
Because players aren't good right now. Like, they're a
They're
necessary
bad.
evil because we need infantry,
Mhm.
but like they're still toughness 3. They don't have any minuses to hit and shooting. They don't have core, so they don't get affected by any of our auras. So like, what's the point?
Dude,
They
Chaos
kinda
Space Marines. Chaos Space Marines are going to get 2 wounds before troops get core. That's the
Yeah.
new thing. Yep.
Yep.
That's it. No, I 100% agree. I don't think that troops need a point hike. The highest strength you can get with troops is 4. Like,
Yeah.
you are
Yeah, there
wounding-
is no other +1 to strength. There is nothing else that we can apply to these units, just other than their base weapon upgrades of, hey, they get +1, they're 4+, you know?
Yeah,
deal with
and
it.
and if you're looking at Harlequin blades, then you're at strength 3, AP 3, 1 damage, and it's like, this kind of sucks. You can only take 2 fusion pistols. Yeah, you could take 2 Nero disruptors, but like, it's like it's it's another 10 points for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're mostly just there to hold objectives, and like nerfing troops before they even have core, I think is a huge knee-jerk
That's a kick in the
reaction.
teeth.
Yeah. We're sorry about the 9 Voidweaver list, but you know, just
That needs to
don't
change,
punch,
but let's...
yeah, don't punch us too hard.
And let me get on my soapbox for a very brief minute here. I strongly disagree with the idea of the data sheet being changed to limiting how many we can take. I don't think buggies deserved it either, but
Oh, you're
I
talking
think
about
that's
VWs?
a really bad... Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's a really bad precedent to set in the game in general, and that whole balance change as a thing needs to go away. I would
agree.
happily undo it for buggies to keep it from happening in the future.
I 100% agree. I feel like a points hike is totally fine. I think that restricting the size, I think, is a huge no-no. When you look at Harlequins in a vacuum, right? Prismatic cannons are the only things that we have that can deal with stuff like monsters that are T6, you know, alluding to the new Tyranids codex that's coming out soon. But hint. But you know, that's the only thing that we have that can really deal with those units. And besides that, we have fusion pistols, and
Which
like
we
we
get
said
2 of.
before, yeah, we only get 2 of, unless you're a madman and you go with like 11 troops with
Yeah.
4 fusion pistols and
And decide to march them up to the opponent's flyer and like, hi!
yeah. Yeah, there's some play with the webway gate. You can probably like stick a webway gate there, have a 10-man squad of troops in there. But at the same time, you have to look at the other armies that are strong right now. Like, you look at Tau, like the reason why Harlequins have to be inside of these transports, Starweavers, not just because they're good, but because if they're not in there, they literally die to Tau. Like, there is
They
nothing we
just
can do.
evaporate.
Yeah, like AFPs or ignoring line of sight, going into your troops that are T3, only have a 4-up invuln, and you know, you get like D3 plus 2 shots, or no, what is it? I think it's just D6 shots off of air bursting fragmentations.
Yeah.
Like, that's you can't run foot troops at this point.
No,
and I think
you
that
can't.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that GW needs to look at. It's not just the 9 Voidweavers. Like, they did the same thing with Grey Knights, right? Grey Knights, they hit Grey Knights with the 2 data sheets that are just good, right?
Yeah.
And since then, it's been a lot more difficult to run Grey Knights because they didn't look at the army in a vacuum. Like, they didn't look at Terminators, change their stuff up. They didn't look at Paladins and change their stuff up. They did like small point decreases, but didn't change the problem that the army had, right? And so when you go down this route of let's restrict Voidweavers down to like only 3, like before, right? Where you can only
just
bring one of each.
Yeah, a unit of 1, yeah.
Yeah, at that point, like, there's no reason to bring Voidweavers anymore. Like, there
isn't.
Yeah, like, they're just, if you put down, like, some type of restriction like that, you have to look at the army in whole, right? Like, there's nothing that Harlequins could do at that point to something that is, like, T8 non-vehicles. There's, like, you can play the mission, but that's it. Like, you're not really killing anything, which is kind of like what happened with Harlequins a little bit during 9th edition after the nerfs that they received and the meta changing a little bit. It became more, I'm going to score points. I don't know if I'm going to kill anything. I'll try to, but if not, no big deal. I'm just going to score points, right? Yeah, which was like, it's kind of lame for an army, you know. Well, how did you feel during that time when it was just like score points? I don't know if you're going to kill anything, but you're just scoring points.
It feels very reductive for the game because the game is based around like interacting with your opponent and you know, fighting, engaging in combat, killing things, pulling models from the board, so on and so forth. It feels very reductive to what the game wants to be, and it was kind of frustrating to do in and of itself because, and yes, the game is a game of tactics, it is a game of scoring points, it is a game of positioning, but everything's got a gun for a reason, okay?
Yeah.
You let me get all these cool guns, all these awesome melee bits, and you know, you have 3 entire phases dedicated to action in this game that you're not encouraging me to participate in, and that feels really crummy.
Going off of that, what are some other changes that you would want from other armies that you think would help bring the game to more balanced level? And we're talking like stuff like Custodes and Tau.
So I wholly admit that I have a very little experience with Tau. I actually don't have a Tau player in my local meta, surprise, surprise. So I don't have much experience with that army, at least in a one-to-one basis. But I don't know. It's really hard to say because I don't like making very sweeping, you know, arguments like, oh yeah, I agree with the community. This needs to happen because I haven't seen it in person. You know, I kind of would defer to someone who has more experience in that network to really kind of make that judgment. But given the fact that these armies have been very pervasive and have seen a lot of reliable, consistent placings and a lot of like I said, just a lot of reliability. I think there needs to be something that needs to be addressed in some aspects. I hear there's a bit of like a core issue going on with Tau. Like Tau's kind of abusing the core mechanic.
Kind of like a lot of people are up in arms about broadsides having core, but like the broadsides aren't really the problem. It's mostly just the crisis suits. So it's like, nah.
Well, then let me ask someone like you who has a little bit more hands-on, you know, a little bit more of a pulse on the greater arc in game as a design space. Do you think in this post-Harlequin world, especially leading into some of the books we see coming out, that Custodes and Tau really do need to be addressed as much as we thought they did maybe, you know, 6 to 9 weeks ago?
Yeah, so Custodes are a little bit weird. They're in the same boat that Harlequins are in, except that's slightly worse. Harlequins have a lot of units that they can fall back on. You know, like we discussed earlier in this podcast, right? You know, Skyweavers, Starweavers, troops, playing the game like through just playing the mission. Custodes don't really have that option. And their anti-tank answer is actually worse than Harlequins, right? You have Stinger Salvo, or not Stinger Salvo, Salvo launchers, which is the Dark Lance basically equivalent, right? For Custodes. And those are only on like your bikes and some Forge World models. And like that is literally it. I don't even know if it's on Forge World models. I don't quote me on that, but it's not as fair. There's not as much as you would think that there is. And when you nerf their anti-tank, then we go into the same problem again, where when something comes up where it's like strength 8, like really hard to kill, you know, hint, Tyranids, right?
Seeing a common theme.
Yeah, common theme here, right? It makes it so hard for them to deal with that. They already have a hard time fighting against Crusher Stampede. So nerfing them even harder is like, with at least their anti-tank is a little bit hurtful. I think some of their stratagems costs need to go up. I think that's warranted. Trajan should probably go up in points. But besides that, like that's pretty much it. When it comes to Tau, though, Tau is a lot harder to balance. Because one, it's a very popular faction, right? So once you balance it, then it's going to become the whole like you nerf Space Marines, and then you know there's a huge abundance of Space Marine players. Everyone's going to get upset, right?
Yeah.
And
that you make a good point. That's something that we've talked about a little bit in Discord. That there is a very big disparity for who owns, plays, and knows how to operate Harlequins versus something like Space Marines, Craft World, even Tau, and even Custodes. You know, Custodes is a very low threshold army where you only need a dozen models to field a 2,000 point army. It's got a very low threshold to enter. Tau is very popular because it's got a very bold statement to make. It's a very unique army in its own. So you know, people gravitate towards it because it has a very unique playstyle, kind of similar to Imperial Knights, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
but Tau has its own little, subsect of people that's not so little. These armies exist outside of the sandbox. Harlequins kind of don't. Like, there's, you can count a Harlequin player at an event on one hand.
Yeah, yeah. I actually pulled up stats of this. I'll go over it in a little bit. Of how many Harlequin lists there were during this past weekend, comparatively to like Town Custodes, which I think is the bigger problem as of right now. Yes, Harlequins are strong, but I also feel like Custodes and Tau are a bigger problem because you're going to be running into them way more than you are going to be running into Harlequins, right? And then Tau, like ignoring line of sight, that Tau's ignoring line of sight is literally the reason why we cannot, as Harlequins, bring foot troops, right?
Correct.
Like, we have to pay the Starweaver tax. We have to pay this transport tax, because if we don't, they will die to Tau, and there is nothing we could do about it. And so that needs to be changed a little bit, probably increase some points there. And, there's also some other things in Tau that I think that can be changed. Things like the Ethereal not being able to be taken with Farsight Enclave's allied worlds.
Absolutely.
Stuff like drones shouldn't be a part of a unit to where you can string out the drones in order to still get applied auras onto, like Exemplar of the Monka, stealth suits, being able to use their homing beacon, and you can kind of just string out because of the drones, things like that. They kind of changed that with bodyguards, where it's on a model by model basis. So that's actually really nice. So I feel like that should be reciprocated to other units as well. Probably increase the points cost of AFPs, change like some of the ways that ignoring line of sight works. And I think like doing those things will probably be a lot better than doing something like restricting a unit size, where, before there was like that meme where there was like this supposed leak of a data slate, and it was like crisis suits, you can only take one squad of them or something like that. Don't think that that's necessary per se. Yeah, just stuff like that I feel like would be good ways to start out with nerfing Tau.
I think out of line of sight shooting in itself is a very tumultuous mechanic. I get why it exists, and I think it should be a thing in some iteration, but the fact that it's now just effectively a free rule doesn't seem good for the balance of the game, especially as we're going to eventually start saturating the market a little bit more with stuff like Hive Guard coming back, with stuff like, Guard being on the horizon.
No. Hive Guard will not come back. Hive Guard will not come back. I'm telling you right now, Hive Guard are not coming back. They're dead in the water. They're dead.
But even so, we don't know what a Guard indirect line of sight's gonna bring for us. This could be a huge problem when we start seeing stuff like what were they Wyverns, the thing that have like the 4d6 shots.
Yeah, or like, Manticores or something.
Yeah.
That
could be a huge problem in 10 to 12 years when the Guard codex comes out. But I agree with you completely. The mechanic in and of itself is on.
I see what you did.
The mechanic in and of itself is on a very shaky ground, because it could very quickly disrupt the entire balance of the game and invalidate a whole lot of things that wasn't already, kind of standing on rocky footing.
Yeah. One thing that they did do in the new Tyranids codex is for Hive Guard, for ignoring line of sight, they did something that's really interesting, and I feel like that I don't know why they didn't do this earlier, because it's such a cool way to do ignoring line of sight. Is the unit, they can shoot ignoring line of sight, but a synapse monster or like an HQ or something, I think it's like a synapse creature, has to have line of sight of what you want to shoot at. So you still have ignoring line of sight, but you need to have a spotter in order to tell you where you have to shoot.
I like that a lot, actually. So it's like a hive mind consciousness thing where I'm shooting from your perspective. I can get behind that. That makes sense. That's a fair. Obviously, we're speaking off the cuff. We haven't seen it in play. It could just be dummy broken like everything else in this game. But yeah, it could be. I think that's a fair compromise on paper. That's a very fluffy way to do it, and also gives you some restriction to the rule that makes it a conscious decision, not just like 8th edition Dark Reapers where you sat in the back of the board and just shot everything forever because you could.
Yeah, like being a Tyranids player, I would just stick my freaking Hive Guard inside of something that is like windowless or behind obscuring terrain and just never move them. And then I just had range of 36 inches to just shoot at anything. And it was not fun for my opponent. And I understand that, and I get it.
For sure.
Yeah. So those are the changes that I was looking for the balance slate. I definitely agree with you with the whole like fusion pistol things, or not fusion pistol things, but like, you know, Voidweaver shouldn't be restricted to a squad of like 2 or whatever. Feels a little bit knee jerky. Moving on from there, as far as like tournament showings for Harlequins over this past weekend, it was huge on the Warhammer competitive subreddit, right? For Meta Mondays, talking about how they had a 75% win rate, excluding the mirror match. The mirror match, I think, was like 80%, which is insanely huge. That's a huge showing.
On the surface.
Yeah, on the surface. But if you kind of like dive into what was going on during those events, you'll see that out of all of the events that happened, and I was counting GTs that had 30 or more players and had 5 or more rounds, right? So Harlequins, in total, there were 24 lists submitted. Tau had 35 lists submitted, and Custodes had 40 lists submitted, all right? There were a couple of GTs. I think that there was 2 or 3 where Harlequins just were not there, and there was Tau and Custodes, and Harlequins just did not exist. Also, so like I think that the ratio is like 1 to 1.45 for Tau, and then 1 to 1.66 for Custodes. So like that's kind of like the ratio that you're seeing. You're going to see a lot more of Tau and Custodes, matchups, right? But when I looked into it even more, the highest that Harlequins had for an event, like the highest amount of pure Harlequin lists that were submitted was 6, and Custodes was at a pretty 11. Tau was at like a decent 8, and like some of the stuff was kind of weird with Tau. Like there weren't a lot of lists that were running velocity trackers. They were still on target lock, which I thought that with Harlequins being out, with like everything being fly, people would switch over to velocity trackers, especially in Farside Enclave, so then that way you can get possibly up to +2 to hit. I don't know what was going on there. And then on top of that, like the armies that are supposed to be in contention going up against Harlequins, a lot of them lost to other armies that weren't Harlequins. So then like they couldn't get into the top. It was weird, man. Like this weekend, if you like really look at the matchups, it's like kind of all over the place. There's a lot less Tau players coming out. And maybe it's because they're doing like the whole meta chasing thing and then changing over to Harlequins instead, which I have a hard time believing that is the case. I don't think that a lot of people actually do that.
I agree.
Yeah, like except for like top table players, then yeah, I can see that. But like the normal Joe Schmo probably isn't spending like $2,000 every single month to build a new army and paint it and commission it. But for Harlequins, right? You're looking at like one major had 5, one major had 3, one had 6, one had 0, 3, 4, just not a lot. And then when you look at these win rates of like 75%, like the difference between a 75% or 80% win rate when you only have like a small sample size of like 10 or 15 games compared to like 75% out of like 30 games is completely different. Like those are two completely different statistics that should be like taken into account. But obviously Harlequins are still strong, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Yeah. I think a lot of what we're seeing, because so you're making the points of meta saturation, where you're looking at the actual abundance of an individual army in a sandbox, in a given sandbox, and we're looking at it from the perspective of how many Harlequin players exist versus the other meta contenders. Yeah. And to rebound off of one of the points you made before, people aren't rushing out and buying 12 boats to field 9 Voidweavers, 15 boats to field 9 Voidweavers and 6 Starweavers. People aren't doing that off the cuff. People like us are shoring up those last 3 boats that we didn't own. And people like, I mean, not so much like Box, because he's a celebrated Harlequin player, but a lot of Eldari player are dusting off their Harlequin collections and feeding them back onto the table. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, definitely. And like a lot of the Starweavers and Voidweavers that were available for GW, and like this is something that I think that GW needs to start addressing, are the leaks that are coming out for these codexes. Because like once those leaks come out, whatever is strong for the people that are really into those factions, like we're talking Harlequins, Eldar, we're talking like, the last few factions that are coming out have huge player bases. Once these leaks come out, whatever is strongest are going to be sold out in like 2 days, if that. right? And that's what happened with Harlequins when the Eldar book leaked. Voidweavers, Starweavers like sold out for I think like until the book dropped, and then it was available again for one day, and then it sold out again. So like,
Yeah.
it's just like a lot of people trying to get their hands on it.
Well, put it into perspective in another way. That we talked about the existence of Harlequin players in a vacuum in the actual like player space of the meta. Let's say Harlequins account for, I'm just using an arbitrary number here, and 12% of the player population. Arbitrary speaking, 12% of Harlequin players of the population. What happens if something else happened like the Harlequin Codex did, where we got some leaks, we got some insider information, just like they're doing with Tyranids now, in an abundantly prominent faction, Chaos Space Marines, Guard, where all of a sudden people find out that Raptors are busted. How's GW going to compensate for that? What happens when Guard comes out and they find out that Basilisks are the new big thing? What's going to happen?
Yeah. And I think that and I know that this is a little bit off topic, but it's an interesting conversation to have about like these nerfs and stuff that they're doing to these armies, right? Is that this balance slate is coming out pretty much probably around the time that the new Tyranids book is going to be coming out, right? If not before that. And that means that they're going to be hitting these 3 factions that are strong as of right now, but then releasing another faction that is going to be a problem. It's very obvious because those books are out. They have been leaked. Like the entire Tyranids Codex has been leaked, and the entire Tyranids Discord, which I'm a part of, and I talk in there a lot. Like, they are going crazy with this book. You know, and putting out this balance slate like a week before a new book comes out, and then just saying, whatever you guys read about the Tyranids Codex, like it's just not happening. That doesn't work. Like it's just we're gonna run into this problem where this is the balance slate, and then we're not gonna have another balance slate for like another 3 or 4 months. That doesn't make any sense. Like what?
No, absolutely not. It's antiquated and it's so short-sighted that you can't run a competitive model that way.
Yeah, like it just doesn't make any sense, and I think that that's like a really big problem that needs to be addressed by GW. But like I said, just going off
We've
topic.
had the conversation a couple times in the Discord that, and I'll kill the topic here, but we've had the conversation a couple times in the Discord that I am terrified of Harlequins getting not even just a knee-jerk, but a substantial, a relevant nerf, and then staring down the barrel of Nids, who we know are going to be scary, of Guard, of Chaos Space Marines, of God knows what else that is going to be Knights. A big problem for us in the future. And exactly, like Imperial Knights, things that are going to be extremely scary to us in 3, 6, 9 months that are going to invalidate our army on top of the kneecapping we're going to get from the balance slate.
It's a hard topic. But on a more happy topic, right?
I like those.
What are some old things from the 8th edition codex you miss with the 9th edition one?
That's again, we kind of talked about this a little bit previously, that there isn't a whole lot I think the 9th edition codex did wrong in terms of removing from us. Like I said, I miss the choreographer of war ability being just a blanket reroll. I miss the solitaire having a mask/sated keyword. There was a lot of fun interactive stratagems that I miss. I think that's the one thing this codex really fell short, and I think it was a compromise of being combined into a macro faction codex, that there was a lot of fun, fluffy, really interactive, really satisfying stratagems that we lost out on that kind of had to be left on the cutting room floor. And that's I think that's the biggest hit we took as a codex.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people that say that they want to see the Harlequin high skill ceiling play style of like using your jank that you have in order to do the stuff that you want to do in order to win. But if you read the codex, they actually stripped a lot of that away from us. Curtain Falls changed. You can't use it with Skyweavers anymore either, which kind of sucks. That's the one where you can, after you hit something, you could just fall back, which is awesome. That was so cool. Still have it, but you have to be next to a transport in order to do it. We lost things like Hero's Path being able to be used with the Solitaire, I believe. We lost Prismatic Blur on our bikes. We lost... what else did we lose?
Torments of the Fiery Pit. No triggers no longer works on Solitaire because reasons. Even though the last one specifically called him out as a legal target, and now this one specifically calls him out as an illegal target.
Yeah, it was really cool, like seeing Torments of the Fiery Pit like fighting against some. You know what's really scary? Going up against a Harlequins player who understands that they have an invuln save and they have an armor save. Because it is very terrifying. Because once you see someone be like, all right, I'm going to take your 1 damage shot on my regular armor save, so it just goes through, which means I can now use Torments of the Fiery Pit, and now I'm going to attack you with more attacks. Like, that's cool. But
I believe the stratagem is still the same.
Yeah.
It still just gives you +2 strength and +2 attacks. It just no longer triggers on the solitaire. But you would do exactly as you described. You would just like, okay, I'm going to take your bolter shot on my armor save. Oops, it got through. There's 1 damage. Now my solitaire is going to be strength 7 with 14 attacks or 13 attacks.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
Yeah, which is cool. Like there's some jank that's still available, but it's not nearly as much jank as there used to be with the old codex, especially like Twilight Pathways. Now you can't charge after using it as well. You can only shoot. So stuff like that got taken away from us, and I kind of miss those things.
And I guess the other thing I would say that the last thing I could think of is, and this is a bit of a contentious topic because of how good like the favorite champion combo is, but I miss a lot of the interactions that the Death Jester had. Like I miss giving him relics. I miss him having his proprietary stratagems. I kind of miss him being a little bit more of an active player in the army.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Especially with like the the morale stuff that you could do before in the 8th edition codex, where you could like force somebody to pick up the model that failed morale. That was cool. I like that. Yeah, it's cool stuff like that.
I kind of wish we were able to go back to the way it was in 7th edition, where you would run away and I could choose the direction you ran away in.
Right?
I kind of wish it did that still, but that's a topic for another conversation.
Yeah. Speaking of balanced slates, I'm sorry. That's actually something that I think that should be hit is the Death Jester. The Death Jester is like pivotal role. I feel like shouldn't be like the Harvester of Torment, the one where it explodes 3 times. I don't think that should be the cheapest pivotal role that he could take. That should probably be the most
I could
expensive.
definitely see that role getting a couple more points. I could totally see that one getting a points adjustment. I don't think the rule should change because it's not really that busted. Like it's good, but like it shouldn't be 20 points base.
I think it's 15.
Or even might even be 15.
Yeah, it's 15. Yeah.
It needs to be a lot more.
Yeah.
It needs to be like 25 or 30.
The fact that Rift Ghoul, the one where it deals mortal wounds, is more expensive than 3 explosions is like, what were you guys thinking? This doesn't make sense.
Okay, but why though?
Yeah, right? But it is funny seeing like Rift Ghoul comboed with like Suit of Hidden Knives with the Death Jester, where he's just like rolling up the board and like dealing 6 mortal wounds to something. That's pretty funny. I like that. That's cool. So that's going to bring us like towards the end of this episode. But before we leave, I want to do one last question here. And that's just about the Tyranid leaks and what you're expecting to do with when their new book arrives. But you've already stated before that you haven't read through like the leaks or anything and what you're expecting to change, right?
I haven't quite had as much time to digest a lot of the leaks, and unfortunately my work life tends to get in the way of a lot of the goings-on during the day. But I've caught a little bit of glimpse of some of the conversations we had, and I think you can fill in this a lot better than I can, but I don't want to say I'm worried because I'm always worried, but this is going to be a real tough codex for us to crack once they come out, assuming everything pans out the way we think it's going to. So I'm actually really curious to think how someone in your game space is going to actually tell us how we can adapt to that codex coming forward.
Yeah, so like when it comes to Harlequins in the matchup that's going to be coming up soon with the Tyranids one, we already have a bad matchup against Crusher Stampede. That's like a 50% win rate for us in general. It's really up in the air whether or not we win that matchup or not. Now you strip Crusher Stampede away because obviously we don't know if it's going to stay or not. We don't know if the Leviathan supplement's going to stay or not. So just going off with just the straight new Tyranids Codex, we're going to be seeing a lot of mortal wound spam. So much mortal wounds. It's like it's going to be ridiculous. Lots of really, really good anti-tank weaponry like your heavy venom cannons, which are going to be strength 9, AP 3, 4 damage, shard gullet, which is a relic, which is strength 12, AP 5, 5 damage. It's like it's ridiculous. There's some crazy stuff in there. Their troop choices are going to be like strength 8 walking up the board with advance and charge. That's a troop choice at strength 8. That's hilarious. And then things like flying hive tyrants going up, dealing like mortal wounds again in melee combat with Reaper of Optitrax. Like I'm saying a bunch of gibberish to you, but like there's a lot of stuff to be worried about.
So I'm frantically scrolling through the screenshots posted in Discord trying to keep up with you.
No, I understand. It's going to be very hard. I think that when it comes to Harlequins, depending on what's going to happen during the bounce slate, I think that you pivot over to however max amount of Voidweavers that you can possibly take, because you're going to need that against the matchup, just because you have no other options besides like fusion pistols, but like that's not going to do much against them, because they're going to be like transhuman most of the time. So things like just playing the mission correctly. Tyranids don't have good access to really good secondaries. The secondaries inside their book are kind of garbage, so they're going off of like what's happening in Nachman data, or in the Nachman GPT book. They can do stuff like R&D, but they can only do that with like 10 model units, or like it's not very easy for them to do that. So you just play the mission well. I think that you'll be fine. And then just like take it on the chin. The units that are going to die, it's going to be like the same play style as like the 9th edition LoL, where you might not kill something, but you're going to outscore in points. And that's going to be like the basic matchup when it comes to Tyranids versus Harlequins.
So let me ask an abstract question and see if you can decipher what I mean by this. Do you think they're going to perform more like a fast Death Guard or a resilient Harlequin? If that makes sense.
Let's see. They're not as fast as they used to be. They don't have Hive Commander anymore, so they can't do like a double move. But they still have access to things like Advance and Charge, which is nice. But with off of a psychic power, which you're probably not gonna be able to deny, because it's gonna be like done like super far away unless you have a deny of like 40 inches. But besides that, I would say more of a Harlequins game. Like they'll play more like Harlequins in the sense of they're gonna, especially as of right now, where it's just like harder to kill, but they don't have a lot of OPSEC bodies comparatively to what they have now, right? Just because they're OPSEC bodies, like their Termagants kind of got the orc treatment, where it's like they went up in points and they have like a better gun, but why take those when you could just take Tyranid warriors? It doesn't make sense. So there's no point. Gotcha. Cool. So that is going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys for joining us on this episode of Chapter Tactics. Batty, please plug yourself and all the social media areas where people can find you. Plug the Discord even. Talk about yourself. I'll give you like I'll give you 20 minutes to talk about yourself.
I don't think even I could fill that much time, but thank you so much for having me. It genuinely has been so much fun to do this. As we mentioned, my name is Batty. You can find me on the Harlequin Discord. If Matt is kind enough, I'll ask him to plug the link in the show notes. There's an open invite. Of course, yeah. We also have our subreddit, our Harlequins, that is Harlequin with an S, 40K on Reddit. I am the lead moderator there. We have an awesome community there as well. I don't do a whole lot of social media outside of Discord and Reddit. I actually don't even have a Twitter. So, tracking me down Discord is probably the easiest way to do it. But that's it. If you're involved in the Harlequin community, I'm always there, buzzing around, watching, conversing with somebody. I love to talk about hobby. I love to talk about list brewing. I love to shitpost and go over memes with people. It's what we do here. So, like I said, I'm just so happy to be here. This was a really great time.
We're all clowns here. Everyone's a clown. But you also have a podcast, Choreographer of War, right?
That's right. Yeah. So myself and one of my other moderators, we do run our own proprietary podcast called Choreographers of War. It is a Harlequin-centered podcast, similar to was it Splinter Minds, who does the Drakari cast? We post every 2 weeks, and we just put out our 3rd episode this past weekend. So we're still pretty green in the podcasting area, but we're having a lot of fun doing it. We plan to keep going for quite some time, and we focus on specifically Harlequin content. So if you're looking for Harlequin-specific content, you can find us on all major podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, so on and so forth. If it hosts a podcast, you can probably find us there. We also link it in the Discord itself, and I'm planning to launch a YouTube channel and back post all of our previous episode once I get through that. So if YouTube is your preferred medium, we can do it there as well.
Let's go. Yeah, there's a lot of niche army podcasts. I think like Sister Act is another one. I like that title.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
With, Sisters of Battle, stuff like that. If you guys are adamant about your armies and you want to learn more about them, I highly, highly suggest using forms of social media like Discord in order to join these communities. Not just going over to the Reddit pages, but going inside the actual Discords. You will learn so much about your army and about different matchups. I cannot harp on how important it is to join these Discords and like really dive into the rest of like the hive mind of your army, right?
I agree 100%. I'm even in Discords for armies I don't even play because I just like the army, or I like the community that's built. I want to learn about it. I'm still part of the Gene Sealer cult Discord. And I don't even have the army anymore.
All right, so that's it for this episode. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. If you guys liked it, make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button, press the like button, all that good stuff, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.